This is a preliminary book review. It's not a book review because I haven't read all the book. I've read some of it, I've gone through some of it, and I suspect it will be one of these books that I will dip into. This is the Shakespeare Apocrypha, however you say it. I don't know. This is the 1908 one, and this is from Oxford at the Clarendon Press, 1908, by C.F. Tucker Brooke. See some, unfortunately not written by Shakespeare there. It would be nice, wouldn't it? However, being a collection of 14 plays which have been ascribed to Shakespeare. And what it's got an introduction, which is very nice. So you've got all content, preface, contents, and then the introduction. And it's also got a long list of lots of plays that maybe or maybe not. The ones that were, obviously some are included, some clearly they decided that not, or maybe they just don't exist. Or they're, virtually impossible to find. Lots of these plays, of course, lost over the years, I suspect. Henry I and Henry II. Maybe it does exist, I don't know. But it's not in this book. So if you look, but it's got a long list of the ones that obviously it's got, and then it's got the list of 14. And then it's got obviously a detailed description of the reasons why it's included them, and also a little bit of background to the story, background to the play itself, background to the reasons why. And before I go any further, there's the list, so you can see the list. So it's quite a reasonable, about 100 odd pages of the introduction. Then we go into Arden of Faversham, or Feversham as it says there. What I love about these things, and it's really quite good, I think, is that you've got the good old title piece just there, Lamentable, just the way they split it over a line, most odd. And I always love it, the way the North Door, obviously door, D-O-R-E, the sign of the gun. At the sign of the gun, 1592. And you've got obviously lots of detail. Actually, I find those more fascinating than the plays sometimes. Well, they are just, actually, I think they should bring out a whole book, massive book of all just that. I would probably pick that up. However, the actual play itself, quite often when you read some of these, you can realise that, and I've been to quite a lot of Shakespeare plays, read quite a few Shakespeare plays. I mean, I wouldn't be able to say, this is Shakespeare, this is not. I'm not a Shakespearean scholar. I could not analyse it and say, you know what, this is obviously 1590 period work, or this is 16, whatever this is about the time he did Hamlet, Hamlet 2, Hamlet 3, or whatever, all those sort of obviously versions of, no, I would have to say, but I just love looking to London, Will, about a piece, and it's P-E-E-C-E, of service, and even that's slightly misspelled, wherein happily thou most pleasure me. What is it of Lord? And it's really odd reading it. It actually makes it very hard to read. But you can actually read through it very quickly. And some are interesting and most odd. You can actually sort of have a feel of the period from these sort of plays. And here's another one. The Reign of King Edward III. Obviously, I love the way that City of London. Absolutely brilliant. City of London. Printed for... And 1596, Cuthbert Burby. And then you got the Comedy of Musidorus, whatever that is. And you've got here the King's Daughter of Aragon, obviously something in Spain, obviously. So you've got that. And again, that's 1598 printed. And of course, quite a lot of these didn't actually say who they were by. See, that's the thing. That's the problem. It didn't say this is by William Shakespeare, whatever. They just left it. People just knew that it was probably by William Shakespeare or not by William Shakespeare. Obviously, the people, when they came to do the folio, they decided that wasn't. Now, I've always wondered whether they left things out. Who knows? They might have decided, you know what, we weren't really certain, or they didn't have a copy at the time. I don't know. It's always a thing. One makes you wonder why things were left out or not, maybe. But I mean, sometimes when you read some of these, you just think, well, they don't really sound Shakespearean. That's the thing. It's just odd. This one. My name is called Master Mouse. Oh, Master Mouse, I pray you, what office might you bear in the court? But I always think sometimes when you read Shakespeare, you just get used to it. You get used to a certain rhythm, whatever. And if there's suddenly someone brought like Merchant of Venice, say, everyone says, oh yes, of course it's a masterpiece. I thought, brilliant masterpiece. However, if it was just found now and everyone said, oh, that's Shakespeare, and you didn't have the front of it, people would argue that they'd say, no, that's not, definitely not, because of the rhythm. No, that's definitely not. Some people would obviously say, yes, of course they would. But they argue about Leonardo's paintings and so on and so on. Even now, so it's like we know probably that ones in the first folio are the way, obviously Shakespearean, the Shakespeare's plays. But some of these, maybe they are, maybe they're not. Maybe parts of it, because of course a lot of these ones, like The Life and Death of Cromwell, maybe he contributed a bit of them. I don't know. I mean, sometimes you read it and you think, well, that's quite good in comparison with some of the rest. So there's a lot of those sort of things, the Puritan widow. But some just read very odd, just very odd. All's one, and this is another one. And you've got a list of all the various versions. Obviously, there you've got a list of the ones that it was included in over the years, because they've had lots of copies of this. I mean, this is 1780, 1839, 1848, and opinions have changed all along. So you've got Yorkshire Tragedy, written by V.V. Shakespeare. Now, that's the trouble with that, because there's a little, is that a comma? So you've got a comma there. Well, no, it's written by V.V. and Shakespeare. V.V. comma, maybe V.V. wrote most of it and Shakespeare put a little bit of it. Or maybe Shakespeare didn't do anything and they just put Shakespeare there by accident. I don't know. The Yorkshire Tragedy, maybe there's a lot of Shakespeare in there. And again, this is something for people to obviously go through. But it's weird when you see that. So you can see that they did include Shakespeare, and then, it's another one, Two Noble Kinsmen. There you've got that. It says Mr. William Shakespeare, 1634. See, that's obviously well after. So it makes, that's obviously going to be when people have argued, obviously, when it was written and all those. I'm certain they know from obviously performances and that sort of stuff. There's certain information, certain references in various books over the years that sort of suggest that it was done then or then, and then they argue about that. So they might, this period was, and obviously they know when John Fletcher was working, so they know the period that he was in the city or whatever at that time. And again, this was printed in London. The coats for John Waterson. Not related to Watersons, Waterstones, and sold at the sign of the Crown. The sign of the Crown, I always love that, the sign of the Crown. It was weird, isn't it? But the sign of the Crown. And this is 1634, so you've got just great. Birth of Merlin, and you've got Thomas More, anonymous play in the 16th century, subscribed in part to Shakespeare. And that's, I've seen that in the British Library. You can see a copy of the thing and they always put it on that page. They don't put it on anyone else's. So it's only Shakespeare. Obviously everyone wants only the Shakespearean text. They don't really care about the rest. So that's, and then you've got notes at the back. Got all the various notes, obviously footnotes, all three, obviously got a lot of detail with all the various, and it gives a lot of description, some casual conjunction, blah, blah, blah. And then you've got bibliography, which is really quite nice, because you obviously got here the collections. And you've got this one printed in the folio. And now this was the folio, I assume, the one later from the actual folio. And they included Pericles, London product, and of course Pericles is now generally included in the proper set of things. It's always the way, the proper set. And these other ones, Cromwell's, John Oldcastle, etc., Puritan Widow, obviously clearly faded away. The Tragedy of Locrine, that's another one. And you've got all the different versions there, and you've got all the volume 4 and volume whatever, and then you've got all the other ones. Obviously Titus Andronicus, London Prodigal, St John, and then Two Noble Kinsmen, and so on. And there's a few mentioned in here that I must admit I've never heard of before. I have to say, you've got, it's probably Fareham. Yeah. There's quite a lot. So you've got editions of each plays as well, and they obviously got a long list of all that. So it's got a lot of detail, background detail, and other details of Puritan as well. Obviously information about that, as well as general criticism, and there's a lot of information there of all the various books. So that's it. I must admit, I love these sort of things. These are just brilliant books. Now, I wouldn't say you're probably going to sit up and, I'm going to have a cheerful, happy read of plays from the Tudor period. Maybe not. But I think they're quite nice to dip into occasionally and just generally have a sort of good read. And maybe some of those plays might actually be, you might enjoy it. And you might think, what, that could be a Shakespearean play. Or maybe not. So, 1908 version, interesting book, I would say, is the best thing. I wouldn't say totally recommended in terms of anything, but it's might be slightly fascinating. However, 1908's done quite well. It's a good 112 years ago, 113 years ago even now.